Comey, James Comey. Mondays with Mike.
Mondays with Mike. Mondays with Mike. Mondays with Mike. Mondays with Mike.
Comey. James Comey. And this is one that I hope you know about because I just heard about it yesterday or the day before.
What's there to know about it? What's there to know about it? It's a very short indictment. It's only 2 charges. It was 2 pages total. It was, in terms of there, it's not so clear that there is there. When you have all the prosecutors within the office saying, don't do this, and you have the previous prosecutor who was charged with indicting him going, I'm not going to do it, and then instead of resigning, getting fired, it's how ridiculous is it going to get?
Okay, so that's the top. So that's the headline here. How ridiculous is it going to get? But the topic is the following: Comey, James Comey, former FBI director.
Yep, director
right?
of the he's the top of the FBI. Yep.
Yeah, and the accusation and the statute of limitations was about to run out on this, but the accusation is that he lied to Congress and that he did in fact leak something to the press. So, my first thing, is it legal to leak things to the press?
It's usually not.
Okay.
If something's private, it's usually not, especially if it's an investigation, because you don't want to prejudice. Think of it like this. If they're not going to charge somebody with a crime, you don't want to actually prejudice the opinions of anyone against a person in any circumstance.
Okay.
Because a lot of the material that gets gathered in an investigation is private, like private information, private banking details, private addresses, or personally identifying information, messages, emails, chat. None of that needs to be leaked ever. You're seeing that right now actually with the Epstein stuff, where Trump administrations will release the Epstein stuff, and then they went to court, and the court said, no, you're not going to release just a whole list of stuff that protects people's identity and their lives precisely because of this reason, that unless somebody's actually being like charged with a crime or it's alleged that they've done anything wrong, there's always a presumption of innocence, that you don't want to defame them, you don't want to slander them, you don't want to do anything in regards to their identity or their any information about them. And yeah, it's usually you're not allowed to leak information from.
Sure, I think you must be talking about a particular type of information, and probably the type of information that has relevance to this, but I'm wondering more generally, because if a sports team schedule...
No, I'll say this. More generally, right, the FBI is a government agency, so there are national security implications to leaking any information about the inner workings of any government agency, right? That there are real security problems for reasons of espionage, for reasons of national security, of any kind of leak, because it shows a vulnerability of the institution. And because the FBI does counterterrorism work within the US, virtually all facets of their operation should always be kept behind a certain curtain, right? We should never be able to understand what it is they're actually doing to combat the real dangers of the world. So yeah, at least in that regard, I think that there is a level of seriousness to this issue that isn't superficial, right? That the top of the FBI, if in any circumstance approving any kind of leak, shows a vulnerability of the institution. That's not good.
Okay, so it's not legal for the FBI or FBI officials to leak things to the press, but take, for example, a different leak. If a sports team was going to release its schedule on Friday, but somebody leaked it on Wednesday, that presumably is not illegal.
Well, okay, so why wouldn't it be, right? They're showing the schedule of a team in advance of them showing up presents a security problem, right, for these groups and these places. Because remember, a lot of celebrities have stalkers, they have all sorts of problems. So probably the biggest example I can think of was when Taylor Swift canceled a show because they had a credible threat that there was going to be an attack. one of the concerts, right? When this kind of information that's not supposed to be released gets released, it allows for bad actors to act badly, if that makes sense, right? So if there's any kind of information that's supposed to be privileged and it gets released, which is what a leak is in that regard, it presents a certain danger. And so, yeah, I think there are circumstances where leaking information to the press has like a greater value than not leaking it. If something's illegal is happening, that presents a threat to everybody because it is happening and the press is the venue by which that information can be heard, that there is value in the press being the recipient of that information. But remember, there's always a risk with all information of it being used badly, no matter what the information is. And sometimes the information actually isn't the information itself that poses the greatest risk, but how the information was released or how the leak happened is the biggest issue, if that makes sense, because it shows cracks in the system, in the foundation, right? If you whittle away at something and you find its weak spot or its vulnerability, then the whole thing can come tumbling down. There are exceptions, right? So whistleblowers have some protection. Okay. If they're whistleblowing like outright illegal or unethical or immoral activity, there are certain protections that they get, no matter who they leak to. But it's not clear that this is that, right? Because the top of the FBI would be the one who's receiving the complaints, not the one complaining, if that makes sense.
Okay, so what I'm wondering now, is Comey going to get a fair trial? Because
No.
Trump's had some time. He's not. Okay, why
Absolutely not. Because they've already, the top law enforcement in the country has already said he's guilty. That the whole point, they're, for the longest time, and I don't know why this isn't still in effect, presidents were not supposed to weigh in at all on the guilt or the innocence of anyone. You saw this with Nixon, actually, where there was a real fear when he weighed in on the guilt of someone that the person wouldn't even have a trial, that the pool would be so tarnished that no juror could say, I will be fair and impartial because the president of the United States said this person's guilty. Who am I to disagree with the president of the United States? In this circumstance, it looks really fishy. All the career prosecutors apparently sent a memo in this office saying, don't do this. The person who was the U.S. attorney, the boss of all the attorneys beforehand, either quit or was fired because of this case. To say that it will be a fair trial, I don't know. It's too prejudicial. It's too prejudiced already. How do you say that somebody has a presumption of innocence if you're saying they're guilty already? The decision already seems to have been made in advance that he is guilty and that he must face some kind of repercussion without even taking the time to get witnesses and present evidence and actually have a jury weigh in. But I think he's got a real case there to say that it's an arbitrary prosecution. You don't see a huge number of people being charged with this specific kind of thing, but also that it's very selective. It's not so clear that the evidence that they have is sufficient enough to actually even charge him with the crime that they're alleging. It's a serious thing, but that's why he has lawyers. That's why there will be a trial. I'll say that much. Maybe he'll lose in the court of public opinion, but his odds are as good as any that he could win in court. It's not even clear at this point that it's even going to go to trial. There's a real case to be made that the judge will look at this indictment or this charge and go, nope, this can't happen because the situation is just too bizarre.
What is he charged with leaking to the press anyway? Like, it would have happened in September of 2020.
No, the leak they were referring to would have happened even before that, much earlier. I think they were referring to a leak from 2017.
He's charged with lying to Congress about whether he leaked something, and the congressional thing happened 5 years ago.
The leak itself isn't even the issue or the charge. It's the conversation around that. There's two competing narratives. That Comey said he didn't approve a leak, and allegedly, I guess McCabe said that Comey did know of a leak and did approve of that leak happening. And that's where the controversy arises of Comey lying to Congress. But I don't know, because they did a report on this, right, where they found that Comey, maybe not telling the full truth, but They couldn't find evidence because it's not like they haven't exhaustively studied this. There was a whole special prosecutor whose entire job was just to comb information on this stuff and see what's there. Because they had the Russiagate stuff with the special prosecutor, and then they had a whole investigation of the investigation. And they have a report that's public that you can read about. You can read all about it. But anyways, that's why I think anybody who's read the report or understands like the debate, the sort of like nitty gritty fine details of this, is no, this doesn't look like it's going to be a case where he's going to lose. But if he does lose, like, I don't know that he's going to get 5 years in prison for it. We'll see.
Can I read something from the BBC about this case?
Sure, go right ahead, yeah.
All right. This is just an article from the BBC. It's titled, Former FBI Director James Comey indicted on 2 charges. Scrolling down here, the case had recently been handed over to a new prosecutor after Eric Siebert, the original U.S. attorney overseeing the case, departed amid concerns he would be forced out. Trump later said he fired Mr. Siebert, who was replaced by Miss Halligan. The case is considered to be the highest profile indictment of a public figure during Trump's second term. On Friday morning, the president called Mr. Comey a dirty cop. It's about justice, Trump said, not revenge. I think there will be others, the president told reporters. I think that refers to others that will be prosecuted. That there are, I don't know about plans, but intentions to prosecute. I think there will be others, the president told reporters, though he denied having a list. Later on Friday, Trump took to social media to thank FBI Director Kash Patel, Miss Halligan, and the investigators who worked to charge Comey. Quote, the level of enthusiasm by the FBI was incredible, but only caused by the fact that they knew Comey for what he is and was, a total slimeball, he wrote on Truth Social. So, is this the prosecution of Trump's political rivals? And what does it mean in the system where if you're in the FBI or some law enforcement agency and you run afoul of Trump, you're gonna get prosecuted and called a slimeball on social media?
Yeah, so that goes to what I was talking about, how it's not going to be a fair trial, right? Remember, Trump's the top law enforcement official in the country, right? And you can't really claim that the trial is all too fair
Chief magistrate.
if they're saying in advance all this like really nasty derogatory stuff about somebody who's about to go on trial for a crime, right? Because that prejudices the jury. The jury is supposed to evaluate the evidence and the facts and then make an opinion from that within the trial itself. This, unfortunately, influences arguably that. But anyways, yeah, this is 100%. It looks like Trump's going after his political rivals. We know this, right? Because he published that message that then got removed about all the people that he wants to go after. Letitia James, Schiff, Comey, that there are certain individuals and people out there in the world that Trump wants to see face criminal consequences for things that he feels has happened to him. So for Letitia James, it's pretty clear that the reason has to do with that lawsuit, the one that happened during Biden's administration. For Schiff, it's because of I'm not 100% sure on this, but it seems to be because Schiff was one of the impeachment prosecutors and has been an outspoken and constant critic of Trump in various fora and media and in his position in Congress, both in the House and now in the Senate, of being critical of Trump. Okay. But that one's a little weird for Schiff. He's a sitting U.S. senator. This is essentially one branch of the government arguing with another branch of the government. That one's complicated. Because remember, the speech and debate clause for the House and the Senate pretty much makes Congress people in particular immune to virtually all prosecution for the things they say, at least on the floor of the House and the Senate. I'm not so sure about some of the other stuff of Schiff saying stuff outside of there, but anything he said in any capacity on the House floor itself or now on the Senate, like I don't see a scenario in which he's ever prosecuted for anything that he says. So if Schiff really wanted to, he could just go to the floor of the Senate and just start spouting just like a huge number of stuff that he's accused of and just start saying it, just blah 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 blah, nonstop, and be like, "Look, I said it there. You can't prosecute me now." He could. Will he? Probably not. Speaking time's usually reserved for serious stuff, but he could. I don't know why he couldn't. If a senator wants to talk on the floor of the Senate, we've seen that they can. Remember, Cory Booker gave his like 25-hour speech just because he wasn't filibustering anything. He wasn't actually like stopping any legislation. He was just talking for 25 hours, which is a long time. That's a long time to talk. I listened to it. It was a cool speech.
Did you listen 25 hours straight?
He didn't stop.
But did you listen the whole thing?
No, I listened. I didn't listen I didn't listen for 25 hours. I listened parts of it, right? So 5 hours at a time, take a break, listen to some more. I didn't
Wow.
listen all at once. I listened to bits and pieces. I listened to the whole speech, and I read a transcript of it. We talked about some great stuff. The point here is that I'm not so sure that Schiff can even. That one's complicated. For Letitia James, that one also is a little like she's the Attorney General of New York, right? Like this is that. Then it becomes an issue of federalism, of the federal government going after state governments. This is just a very strange saga. I think part of the reason that they went after Comey in the way they did is that Comey's out of government, right? He doesn't have any kind of political cover or umbrella or position of authority that provides a certain level of immunity from prosecution right now. So that makes him vulnerable, if that makes sense. And in that vulnerability, we are now seeing what's happening is that they found like the one thing where they thought they could make a case, and so they're trying to do that. And the question then becomes, do they succeed in that trial? And I'm not so sure. It doesn't look like they do, but maybe they do. We don't know, right? That's the whole mystery of trials is that you never actually know what's going to happen until after it's done. Maybe the truth will out. Maybe something very serious did happen that we are not privy to precisely because it was a leak of something serious, but we don't know how serious or the seriousness of it until after the fact. And we don't know. And we won't know, right? We probably won't know. Like in any functioning system, we'll never know because it's the government essentially saying, look, this is something that we failed at. This is information we failed at protecting. It goes back to what I was saying, that the leak itself is the problem, that it's a security vulnerability, completely aside from the information that was presented, or whatever the information was. It's just the fact that it happened at all.
Now I'm really interested in the Cory Booker speech, but
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great,
Cool.
it's a wonderful speech. I liked it. I liked all the, so what part of what I liked about it was all the senators wanted to help Booker out by letting him rest his voice. And so they'd ask these really long-winded questions, like 10-minute, 20-minute questions that were just, some of them were very long questions.
okay, so the span of the speech was 25 hours and 5 minutes. It wasn't him speaking uninterrupted for that entire time. Okay.
Yeah, it's a semantic distinction, right? It's speech in the sense that it was his speech time, that he
held
had
the
the
floor.
floor of the Senate.
Yeah.
He
Okay.
didn't actually continually speak for 25 hours because that would be a really long time.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That sounds pretty crazy. Okay.
Yeah, for the Comey situation, it doesn't look great that this is the priority of the administration. It's always backwards looking. This goes back to the first Trump administration. This disagreement and this issue with Comey goes way, way back. It's just this ongoing saga of political retribution. The big question that I always ask for any of these is this the most important thing right now that the government should be doing? Isn't there a shutdown looming very soon? Like, why isn't it an all hands on deck situation now to ensure that the American people get the services and the functioning government that they deserve? What's going on? Don't these people in power have a responsibility to actually ensure that we have a functioning government? right? Because a government shutdown involves a lot of people not getting paid. It involves a lot of furloughs. It involves, in some circumstances, people who are required to work who don't get paid for that work. There's an uncertainty that they will ever get paid for the work that they do. There's a political process that has to go forward for people to get back pay, but they're in jobs of such important responsibility that they have to work anyways, right? People in positions, certain security positions and certain things where they have to work no matter what, even if there's the possibility they don't get paid. That's scary. That's a very strange situation. It's looming. I understand why the Democrats are picking the battle of healthcare as like the thing, right? Because premiums are about to skyrocket for millions of people, and that's gonna suck. But ostensibly, the party in power and the president are supposed to keep the government working at a minimum, right? Keep the lights on, keep everything chugging along. Why is the priority right now all this stuff, like these personal vendettas and prosecutions and all that, when there's like real stuff going on that affects the whole country, millions of people, tens of millions of people, right? No, a government shutdown is not good. It's never good, right? Don't you remember the times when they don't raise the debt ceiling or they threaten to not raise the debt ceiling, and then you have the Treasury Secretary come out and say, oh, we're using all emergency measures and expending every tool we have in the toolkit to make sure we pay all of our debts on time.
I tell you, that's a major embarrassment when that happens.
Anytime that happens, right? Because everybody around the world is like, what's going on? Right? Other countries don't. That's not quite true. Belgium, for a long time, didn't even have a functioning government because they had two parties that couldn't quite agree on what to do. But it doesn't look good, right? I don't know. I remember the other times there were shutdowns. There was always this like patina of uncertainty of like, when's it going to end? When are we going to go back to business as usual? What's going on? And it's coming up. It's a few days away if they don't get hammer out some kind of deal. That was my last thought on the Comey thing. It's like, why is this the priority? Why are the American people not always the priority of making sure that everybody gets the services they need, that everything's working? That's where we are.
Big New York bust. I don't know if you saw this, but in New York there were certain apartments rented out that had server farms in them and 100,000 or so SIM cards, such that they could send 30 million texts a minute. It would appear it was to disrupt the national infrastructure. It came near the time to when the UN was in session. You can't really call it vandalism on such a grand scale. At that point it becomes something akin to sabotage or perhaps terrorism. And they were able to send out 30 million texts a minute. Now, did they do it at all? I don't know. It's unknown who this was. Unknown to the public, let's say. No arrests have been made. But to me, the fact that an attack like this is possible just speaks volumes of the lack of redundancy that we've come to in terms of communication, in terms of the connection that a lot of people have to the outside world. Because time was that you had a landline in your house, and you had the television coming in via a different means, and then you had cell phones, albeit they were more expensive, were a third means. But now, a lot of people, now it's all going online. You got voice over IP, you got streaming, and you can still write something in snail mail, but do we even have telegrams anymore? If we do, they're very limited and nobody uses them.
They do. Do you remember
they still have them? Okay.
Yeah, do you remember the WikiLeaks scandal?
Yes.
Part of the scandal was the cables, the telegrams between different embassies and diplomatic, like that was a while ago, but no, telegrams still exist. What do you think of fax machine? It's very similar. The technology is very similar.
Sure, it's similar, but but faxes are over phone lines, and they're taking away the copper wire.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Then who knows? I don't know what the current situation is. It's certainly changed. But I do get what you're saying, that we have condensed all the different ways that we were communicating into one single point of failure. But
Yes, precisely.
going to your list of stuff, one thing you didn't include was radio, which
Fortunately, they still have it.
that there still is radio, AM and FM, that we can communicate information, emergencies, all that stuff. But no, your point is true that a lot of the different sort of functions and ways that we communicated has been condensed. And it's not like there's community that people have, the third place, as it were, that people would congregate of, because there was a time when people would go to city hall or town hall or some meeting place and everybody would know, like, if something bad happens, we go here. But it's not so much so in the modern era that people will show up in person to things. There are exceptions. People still go to church. Technically, public schools are serve that kind of function for a lot of communities, because a lot of public school districts are like their own little kingdoms, their own little fiefdoms. They own a lot of land, and they have buildings that can function as meeting places because that's what they function as. So stadiums and gyms and that kind of thing. But it's not so clear. Say there was a giant earthquake right now in the Pacific Northwest, the big one, right? It's not the big one, the one that's going to cause huge waves and cracks and lots of stuff, the big earthquake. It's not so clear to me right now where I would immediately go in the case of that earthquake. Probably somewhere high up, or somewhere like at least out of the way of the wave, right? But how high? I don't know. Which place that's high up? I don't know. How I would get there? I'm not so sure, because I don't own a car. I would rely on public transportation, and I don't know that it would be reliable if the roads are all messed up, and I don't know. And so that's the thing, though. Like, if something on the level of an emergency were to happen, like, it's not so clear what the information that would be reliable would be coming from. Would it be the radio, TV? Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, that was good. That was good. Because it underlies the fact that it's an even greater point of failure, because now it's the public square in a certain sense. Like, we still have the literal public square, but who goes? I don't even know what my public square would be, where it would be exactly. Yeah, and the story stood out to me because when I went camping, it was about 8 years ago, and I called my mom from a payphone. That was, I think, the last time I used a payphone was like 8 years ago. And what I noticed was I could hear her reply very quickly. There wasn't like the delay that people barely even notice. If you watch as a report,
a landline is a stable connection. The issue with cell phones is you're like pinging a satellite.
Yeah, yes, it can be a satellite, but you're hitting on the crux of what I'm talking about. With the old telephone lines, it was point to point. It was, you have one nailed up circuit, they call it, to the central office. And then the central office knows how to communicate directly and quickly with another central office close to the receiver. And it's actually, back in the day, it was a single, like, complete electrical circuit, you to the people. They did multiplexing and stuff where you combine one onto one line, and perhaps then it becomes slightly different. I'm not an electrician, I don't understand exactly, but what I do know is, nowadays, even if it does not go via satellite, the message is like winding its way around the internet, or the wide area network, WAN, and just finding a path. And the path might get disrupted. It can then find another path pretty fast. Usually. It works to send a lot of data. Like, we need the internet. I'm not saying, oh, the internet sucks. I'm saying, like, I think we also need an alternative means. And companies, because copper, it's a lot of money, and you can melt it down. You can melt copper down, and you can actually keep using it once you melt it down. So it's a valuable material. So I'm not saying we have to go back to copper lines either, but I just think that the vulnerability to this kind of attack has shown me that we need other means. We need redundancy. Another thing, too, is that car manufacturers are trying to take the terrestrial radio things, the terrestrial radios, out of the cars. I'm not going to say which ones are doing that, because I don't know which it is, but they want to save a buck.
That's not a good idea. I do think we always need access to radio.
Yeah, we certainly do. Especially because radio is local. Like, you have a transceiver, and it's local. It doesn't go around the world. So, you have companies trying to save a buck. And trying to get rid, and largely succeeding, although not with radio, not currently.
That's where government does have to play a role, is that they
Yes.
have to institute certain standards for, if you want to sell your good on the market, you have to have this thing, radio, or you have to have some means of people being able to communicate because of, like you're saying, emergencies, right? So if something really dramatic happens, like an earthquake, volcano, or tornado, hurricane, alien invasion, whatever, that you need to be able to communicate to people what the situation is and where they can go and how they can get help.
So they say that this server farm with 100,000 SIM cards could send 30 million texts a minute. So per SIM card, that's 300 texts per minute. Per SIM card per minute, that is. People don't need to send that many texts. An individual doesn't need to send that many texts. And I think, so in response to this, concerns me a lot. I'm thinking, well, a person doesn't need to send any more than one text per 5 seconds. So maybe the companies should say you get to send text at this rate, and that would make the infrastructure less vulnerable to this particular attack. I don't know. Do you think government should have a role in, I guess, throttling throttling would be the word that they use, throttling down the amount of text messages that somebody can send, or in other ways of mobile telephony?
In some respects, that's a free speech issue. Say, for instance, someone has a concert or a charity event or some kind of nonprofit trying to get people involved with something, or even democracy stuff, like the donate to political campaigns or whatever, where they send out just a huge number of texts all at once to any possible donor or voter. There's certain considerations the government has to make in that regard, because the government is, at least the people who would be making these decisions, they're the ones who are direct beneficiaries of huge numbers of texts being allowed to be sent out, right? You think of all the politicians that have to raise money for their campaigns to keep their jobs, right? Like, they would face real challenges if they couldn't send out this constant fundraising emails and text messages and just constantly give us money, feed the machine, right? But yeah, no, there is a role, obviously, for government, that they have to have at least the ability to throttle text messages in case of an attack, right? That if they know there's some kind of attack that's imminent, that's being communicated over these means, they need to have some ability to stop it in transit, as it were, right? Because you can shut down telephone lines, you can shut down radio. They need to be able to shut down this kind of stuff too. There's no question. I just don't know that they should be able to constantly throttle it. What you're talking about, of like limiting, because that would be interfering with the private business of these telecom companies that make money in part on their ability to sell the ability to send lots of text messages. I remember a time when it was very expensive to send a text, that it really added up unless you had the unlimited texting.
Yeah, but now they include it for free, but you don't. Yeah, you can just do as many as you can, and you can't even save money by saying no. I don't want the unlimited. They say no. We only sell you the unlimited, except for certain grocery store cell phones.
I get what you're saying, but yeah, they would run up to some free speech issues if they just stopped people from being able to send text messages.
Yeah, speech I get. I'll point to the fact that you're not allowed to transmit on police radio, for example. So, speech, yes. Broadcast, unlimited broadcast, anyone can do unlimited broadcast. I wonder where exactly the SMS text system would fall under, but sure, free speech. So if what I'm saying of, oh, let's throttle it to one every 5 seconds, which I don't think is too bad, but you're right, there are free speech considerations, so we would consider carefully if we would do such a thing.
But I will say that government should have the ability for emergencies to be able to stop or severely limit communication if they need to, for the reasons that I explained, because I'm sure that they probably do have some kind of ability to do that. They just don't advertise it. Just because for almost any technology, there's always like a workaround or some kind of thing that's put in place to break glass in case of emergency. The powers that be have real powers, right? That they have actual abilities to operate and do things. It's good that they caught them, right? It's not great. It would have sucked if the people with all the SIM cards somehow shut down all cell communication in New York City during the UN. That would have sucked.
Yeah.
It would send a really bad message about the safety and security of the United States if that had gone through. It would cause panic and concern and sadness. All these world leaders showing up for this huge diplomatic event and they can't use their cell phones. Think of how much of a diplomatic catastrophe that would be. That would be terrible.
It would be very bad for brand America.
Very bad.
It would be very bad.
Yeah.
It would be awful. It would be so bad.
Yeah.
Mondays with Mike.